Anyway, after the beautiful keynote speech by Marinos Saryanis hocamız, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the first session of the symposium. A very short note for this symposium, which has been first founded as an initiative by our history graduate students. I'm really so proud of them because it has been really a very well recognized academic tradition by now. And I thought while coming to here, maybe 100 years from now, if there is still a field of knowledge called history, perhaps somebody will be interested in Bilkent History Department, and I'm sure the symposium speakers would be able to use those symposium topics as a historical source. So it's good to think like that. The title of our session is Islamic and Classical Ottoman Traditions. We have three presenters here. Each will have like 15 minutes to talk. I hope you will all remain within the time constraints. And I will take the questions at the very end. We'll have hopefully 15 minutes for the questions. And first speaker is Izzeddin Oktan. He holds a BA degree from Faculty of Law at Bilkent University, actually. And interestingly, he is still licensed as a lawyer in Istanbul. He completed his MA at Koç University, and he's currently pursuing his PhD in history at Koç University. The title of his presentation is From Warriors to Artisans, Reinterpreting the Ideal Youths in Futuwwah Tradition. The floor is yours. I think you have a presentation. Thank you.
First, we should get familiar with what is Futuwwah tradition. Futuwwah was an Arabic word, literally means youthfulness, driven from a word al-fata, young in singular, al-fityan in plural. In the historiography of Futuwwah, this term generally translated as a spiritual chivalry or Sufi chivalry. However, I argue that if we translate the Futuwwah as a chivalry, we miss the core value of the old Futuwwah ethic, which is embedded the moral role that young people are expected to play in the society, even though there was some overlap between Futuwwah ethic and medieval Western chivalry. Therefore, I suggest that we should translate the Futuwwah as ideal youthfulness. Before delving into the question of this presentation, we shall start with the important distinction that Futuwwah in history was used to describe two things. Firstly, using as a term that entails all kinds of moral virtues such as bravery, generosity. Secondly, to represent some social, political, and religious group that designated as a Futuwwah group deemed to uphold the Futuwwah ethic such as Ayar and Ahis and some other group. In this presentation, then in addition to that, Futuwwah in history basically different form. Basically we can, we can down to three types, the Sufi Futuwwah, warrior Futuwwah, and artisanal Futuwwah. But this line is not so strictly line, that these all types of Futuwwah mix each other. Okay. Then the Futuwwah tradition has been one of the most enduring traditions in the Islamic society, spanning from the 9th century to modern time. After a scrutinized study on 28 Futuwwah treatises, namely Kitab al-Futuwwah or Futuwwah Name, I suggest a new periodization for Futuwwah tradition in my master thesis based on these Futuwwah treatises. According to this new periodization, Futuwwah tradition passed through the 6 stages. These are the Ayar Sufi period, especially in the greater Khorasan region between the 9th century and 11th century. The second Abbasid Caliphate, Al-Nasr al-Dinillah period in the late 12th and early 13th century until the arrival of Mongols. The third, Ilhanit Ahi Fityan period, especially in Anatolia and Iran. Fourth, the pre-Ottoman Turkish Ahi Fityan period. The five craftsman Futuwwah tradition from the 15th century to the 19th century. And the sixth, the Sufi Tariqa Futuwwah tradition from the 14th century, the modern era. First, we should look at the timeline of these Futuwwah treatises written between the 11th and the 15th century. As we can see, the first Futuwwah treatise begin in the, to be writing starting in the 11th century. However, in the However, in the 12th century, the treatise on Futuwwah ceased until the reformation of the Abbasid Caliphate Nasr-id-Dinillah. Abbasid Caliphate Nasr-id-Dinillah initiated in the Futuwwah order, namely Ayyar Futuwwah in Baghdad in 1182. He gradually controlled all Futuwwah organization in Baghdad and around. He ordered an issue of Futuwwah treaties to organize the interior structure of the Ayyar Futuwwah order. After he succeeded in making himself a sole Qibla direction for all Fityan young around Baghdad, Abbasid Caliphate launched a new ambitious project that create a courtly royal Futuwwah club that Nasr-id-Dinillah invite other sultans of various Islamic states such as court of Mamluk Sultan, court of Selçuk of Rum Sultan, court of Harizm Shah Sultan to invite them in the Futuwwah order that recognized the caliphate as a sole Qibla, sole direction. Especially in Anatolia and Iran, Selçuk Sultan gave a warm welcome to the envoy of caliphate. They were pleased to join the Caliphate Futuwwah club. Therefore, we can see the flourishing of Futuwwah treatises after the initiation of the Caliphate Nasr-id-Dinillah. If we look at the geographical distribution of these treatises, the new periodization becomes evident. As you can see, the earliest Futuwwah treatises here were located in the greater Khorasan region. After the Abbasid Caliphate Nasr-id-Dinillah reformation, Baghdad was the center for Futuwwah treatises. Then after the Mongol invasion, the Ilhanid lands, here the greater Azerbaijan region, was fertile for Futuwwah treatises. And lastly, we can see the Principality of Anatolia for the Turkish Futuwwah treatises. But all of the diverse Futuwwah treatises and tradition also carry a continuation. As you can see in the connection map, all Futuwwah treatises influenced, almost all of the treatises influenced each other from the early stage of Khorasani Futuwwah down to Turkish Futuwwah treatises. This connection map demonstrates a significant continuity while it signifies some distinct trend within the tradition. I explain all this change and continuity in my master thesis in detail. Okay, since we understood the Futuwwah tradition, we can move the presentation inquiry. How was the Futuwwah transfer from the warrior type to artisanal type? I want to show two representative passages that there were 150 years in between. First one is the excerpt from the Hanbali jurist Ibn Jawzi book, Talbis and Iblis. Quote, Ayyar in their taking money, people money, even though they call themselves Fityan, they say a feta does not commit fornication, does not lie, to preserve the sacredness of women, does not violate their modesty. But in spite of this, they do not restrain themselves from seizing people property, forgetting bad blood they cause by taking property. They call their order, tariqa, as Futuwwah, end quote. The other one is the Ibn Battuta, famous Ibn Battuta. The Rihle was written in the year 3032, 150 years later from the Ibn Jawzi. He said, quote, an ahi in their idiom is a man who assembled a member of his trade, sina'a, together with other young unmarried men and those who adopt the celibate life, choose their leader. That what is called Futuwwah also. His associate work during the day and gain the livelihood, and afternoon pray. They bring him their collective earning. Their member are called Fityan and their leader, as we have said, is ahi, end quote. The presentation question is how this transformation happened. How did the Ayyar turn to Ahi? To answer this question, we have to know who the Ayyar were and what the Caliphate Nasr-id-Dinillah reform aimed to achieve. Ayyars were a paramilitary group, mostly consist of unmarried, unemployed, armed young men with strong tie to each other. There was a social phenomenon of early Islamic society that Whenever the central government failed to sustain the social and political welfare of the citizen, these young men appear in the many different parts of the urban center and shed blood, seize a proprietor caravan, and sometimes support a different political and religious faction within the society. But we should be careful that while the chronicle writers, which were close to central government elite, label Ayyar as a bandits, highwaymen, vagabonds, however, in the middle and lower class likely approve some of the Ayyar activity, such as stealing merchant money to distribute to common people, like a Robin Hood, or fighting against the various different social religious sects, especially in the periphery of Abbasid Caliphate. In Khorasan region in particular, Ayyam becomes successful to establish the Safarid state. Therefore, it is not surprising to see the earliest Futuwwah treatises were written in the Khorasan region. Let's look at the individual example of important Ayyar leader famous for his Futuwwah, Abu Ali al-Burjumi. His nickname was Fatih, which means the murderer, and everybody in the street of Baghdad called him commander. Burjumi plundered many caravan, merchant store with other young friends. However, according to the chronicle, he never caused harm to women or someone who surrendered himself to Burjumi. When the Shiite Buit government got weak in Baghdad, he started to attack the Shiite district of Kark and the specific cause of the leader of the Buit in Baghdad. His fame increased among the Sunni common people in Baghdad. People asked the Imam to hold Friday ceremony in the name of Burjumi. Here we can see, even though Ayyar were thieves, plunder, murderers, they have some fame among the common people because they perceive to uphold some Futuwwah ethics. Okay, then when we came to the Nasirian period, as a part of the Reformation project of Futuwwah, a concept and organization schema that emerged. This schema, I suggest that they call disciplinary circle. According to the Nasirian Futuwwah treatises, Futuwwah group were not a single unit, rather many distinct groups known as a Beit, houses, exist. Each houses was autonomous unit, comprised multiple hizb, parties. Parties operate within the house system. Within these parties, numerous elders, namely Kabir, individuals, were devoted to educate the mansub, which means affiliated in the Futuwwah ethics. Each mansub turned a rafiq, companion to each other, to watch out for their behavior, to know whether they comply with the Futuwwah ethic or not. In this Nasirian Futuwwah treatises, the Nasir write a principle of Futuwwah ethics were explained in detail in this Futuwwah treatises. One of the treatises, according to the Harputi treatises, these are the 7 principles, are cardinal virtue of Futuwwah. This principle. I want to emphasize one of the principles, that lawful earning, kasb al-halal. Since the Ayyar had a bad reputation for living a banditry and stealing money from the merchant, Nasirian Futuwwah treatises focus on the lawful gain, turning a honest penny through the practice in a craft sinar. Another Nasirian Futuwwah treatise, Ibn Mimar, say affiliating to specific elder mean that young muntasib belonging to the craft of his elder, the sinar of his elder. This indicates that Nasirian reform in the Futuwwah tradition was dedicated to discipline and domesticate this troublesome Ayyar youths by vocational training under the elders. Later, similar disciplinary circle was adopted by the Ahis. As mentioned before, Selçuk of Rum joined the Caliphate Royal Futuwwah Club in the early 13th century. Gradually, courtly Futuwwah emanated among the common people through the disciplinary circle. According to the Ahi Futuwwah treatises, Ahi is responsible. This is the similar type of the disciplinary circle we see in the Ahi Futuwwah treatises. Ahi is a responsible person to care for morality of manner of tarbiyah, which means to nurture group of people. Whoever young man tied to an Ahi master. The tarbiyah are friends to each other in the paths of Futuwwah. They were called biraderan or rafikan, or in Turkish Futuwwah treatise, yarenler. If a tarbiyah acquire a good moral from the Ahi, tarbiyah can become an Ahi one day and then begin to take on new tarbiyah for himself. More importantly, in the 13th and 14th century, these Ahi masters were notable people in society, such as emir, commander, and merchant and artisan. In the Ilhanit Ahi Futuwwah treatises, the author first time mentioned Asnaful Futuwwah. There were basically two asnaf al-futuwwah, which first one is the kavli, wordly futuwwah, and seifi, sword futuwwah. They explain in the seifi futuwwah consists of the soldier and holy warrior, and the kavli futuwwah is consists of the people that initiate, acquire the discipline from the ahi. From the explanation, the early Ilhanet Ahi Fityan treatises, it is obvious that some of the futuwwah members were still soldier, but who was exactly this kavli futuwwah member? Some passage in the earliest Ahi Futuwwah treatise can help us to locate them. In Suhraverdi Kitab al-Futuwwah, Suhraverdi lists some member of the Futuwwah 2 times. Among them, the soldier and tradesman, Esnaf al-Tijara, mentioned. The other time, the soldier, merchant, and the Turks were mentioned. So it can be indicated that merchant and craftsmen were regarded as separate class of Futuwwah member alongside the soldiers. Here again we can see that when the Futuwwah tradition entered into the early Ilhanid period, the member of Futuwwah diverse and the artisanal Futuwwah was born separate from the soldier Futuwwah. We are moving to the next stage of Futuwwah tradition, which is after the Mongol period. The Turkish Futuwwah treatises were written across Anatolia. In these texts, the role of the Ahis as a head of various artisan guilds solidify, and the Seifi Futuwwah sank into oblivion. I want to share a passage from the earliest Turkish Futuwwah treatise written by the Halil bin Yahya Çoban. He said, an Ahi must earn lawful provision. This is perhaps obligation and sunnah. Therefore, an Ahi must learn a profession and craft and engage with. If a person has no profession, they possess no Futuwwah either. And continue. From this passage, we can see that the Futuwwah members are encouraged to possess an art to earn to lawful gain. According to them, the ideal youth person should have a art that provide themselves a livelihood in a lawful manner, as opposed to pre-Nasrian Futuwwah that engage in banditry and stealing money. In conclusion, in this presentation, I argue that troublesome youth in violent Futuwwah group were gradually integrated into society through the vocational training alongside the moral education under the guidance of their elders. By researching this transformation, I aim to examine how a tradition can endure during a serious paradigm shift by reinterpreting the core value. I argue that since the term Futuwwah is rooted in the youthfulness and its perfection, the expectation of the youthfulness can adopt the new paradigms. In the case of Futuwwah tradition, while the pre-Nasrian Futuwwah idealized brave, powerful, enduring youth, they were violent in nature. Post-Nasrian Futuwwah idealized the moral, generous, caring youth, which was embodied by the moral artisan. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your presentation. Our next speaker is Enes Baş. He received his BA from Middle East Technical University in Ankara and is currently pursuing his MA in History at Hacettepe University. His presentation is titled Traces of an Extinct Ottoman Tradition, Diş Kirası or Tooth Money. I think it will be something interesting. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Firstly, I would like to express my gratitude for the opportunity to speak at this conference. Today I will discuss a rather unusual and minor tradition from the Ottoman period, diş kirası. That is tooth money or literally tooth rent in Turkish. This weird name derives from a playful notion. By offering food to a guest, the host is taught to cause a slight wear on the guest's teeth. Therefore, a form of compensation is humorously deemed necessary for the wear and tear caused through the host's hospitality. Hence, the host not only hosts the guest and offers food, but also provides something additional in the form of tooth money. Sometimes it is literally money, sometimes it is a gift of a different nature. However, my aim is not to describe this curious tradition, then go on to list examples from archival documents. Rather, I want to examine the multiple layers of meaning in this practice, both in its original historical context and in the present day. Diş kirası has two dimensions, two distinct meanings that reflect the experiences of different social groups within Ottoman society. While one of these has been celebrated, remembered, and actively revived, the other remains largely unknown except historians. Thus, what appears to be a small and seemingly nice custom serves not only as an entry point into sociopolitical landscape of Ottoman time, but also as a case study in collective memory. How societies remember and also how they forget. Collective memory seems to function like individual memory, selective in its treatment of recollections and deeply emotional. So I hope to discuss all these around a small tradition. Today, diş kirası is remembered primarily as a refined and pleasant Ottoman custom. It often appears in stories about elegance and generosity of Ottoman Ramazan hospitality. In this way, diş kirası becomes part of a larger imagined picture of the Ottoman past, one that is shaped by selective remembering rather than historical complexity. Just to give a few examples, iftar events organized by Presidency of Religious Affairs occasionally incorporate this antiquated tradition in Ramadan. One can also see references to it in social media posts by official municipal accounts, as well as in national news coverage. Therefore, it is not surprising that this practice is being revived and promoted, particularly among conservative segments of society, within the socio-political context of our time, neo-Ottomanist policies, and a sense of nostalgia for the imperial past, and so on. However, this is not an entirely invented tradition. There is indeed a practice called diş kirası. It represents one of the distinctive examples of the influence of Persian court culture on the Ottomans. Although it was first encountered in the Ottoman language through the 15th century translation of the Kabusname, the practice itself has a history of nearly 1,000 years. Written in the 11th century at the Ghaznavid court, the Kabusname is one of the first examples of nasihatname genre. Its author, Keykavus ibn Iskender, presents this practice as something a proper host should fulfill, placing it in the section that describes the responsibilities of the host and the guest. The name of the practice in its original Persian Kabusname is Dendan Müst. In the Ottoman Turkish translations before 1432, this phrase was translated as konuk hakkı or tuz ekmek hakkı, which refer to alternative concepts of hospitality in Turkish language. However, in the 1432 translation by Mercimek Ahmet, prepared for Murat II, the phrase appears explicitly as diş kirası. After this point, it is clear that the previous conceptions of hospitality and various traditions related to it in Turkish culture, the examples I just enumerated, tuz hakkı, konuk hakkı, merge with this peculiar Persian tradition and become known as such. One example from the reign of Mehmet II illustrates this. His Grand Vezir Mahmud Pasha served his guests rice and chickpeas, in Turkish nohutlu pilav. But some of the chickpeas were made of gold, and whoever tries to eat it would receive his diş kirası. Therefore, diş kirası should not be understood merely as a marginal custom. It was a centerpiece of the culture of gift-giving and hospitality in Ottoman elite circles. Even in divan literature, which was basically a court literature, the phrase is used as a metaphor by the poets such as Baki and Necati. In this context, gift exchange was not simply generosity, but a social and political obligation that defines status. It is no exaggeration to say, to be a political actor in the Ottoman court, one had to be a gift giver. Gift giving was not a choice but a responsibility for the elite. In short, as the saying goes, noblesse oblige. The Sultan, of course, was the greatest gift giver who demonstrated his sultanic generosity through such acts. He was the source and the game setter of the Ottoman gift economy. It was indeed an economy of gift giving. Even the Sultan accepted reciprocity. His example was no doubt replicated in elite society. We read from Evliya Çelebi about a banquet which was organized by Kabudan Köse Ali Pasha and graced by the Sultan, that the Pasha presented gifts, for example, 10 slaves and two decorated horses with precious ornaments, to the Sultan as diş kirası. We know from other examples that sultans reciprocate such gifts. Diş kirası perhaps experienced its peak in the 19th century, with luxurious konaks and palaces in the capital and the culture of hosting and holding feasts that accompanied it. We see an important anecdote both in Tahsin Pasha's and Şadiye Sultan's memoirs that no one left the iftar banquets organized by the palace of Abdülhamit II without receiving a gift, specifically diş kirası. After showing the roots and the continuity of this beloved tradition, now it is time to ruin it and blemish this story. I will do that by letting you know the other meaning, other usage of this term, diş kirası, which is radically different and largely unknown except historians. Even if it was, I very much doubt that people would have wanted to remember it. In the second sense, the essence of tradition is completely subverted, and now we see it in a very different social context. Here, diş kirası refers to an illegal and additional tax forcibly collected by members of the Ehli Örf, meaning local administrations and soldiers in the provinces. In his 17th century chronicle, Naima mentions Sarıcas, irregular troops who raid houses and seize goods under the name of diş kirası. Excuse me. It is a curious thing that a gift given by a host as a display of generosity and high morals now becomes the name of an extortion practice. You can even see this meaning in a contemporary Bulgarian dictionary. But the connection is not obscure. The local administration and irregular troops had this bad and also very common habit of making themselves guests at ordinary people's houses without any invitation. In this involuntary hosting, the owner of the house was burdened by many inconveniences, such as feeding them and their animals. The reluctant host was also forced to give up some valuable items or money as diş kirası, a plain extortion under the name of hospitality. Even the kadis, as it can be seen in this document, would want diş kirası in some circumstances. The emergence of this practice, or at least the widespread of usage of it, was related to economic and administrative changes that took place in the Ottoman Empire during the 17th and 18th centuries. With the center losing its grip on the provinces, an atmosphere of insecurity emerged particularly in Ottoman Anatolia. The situation was intensified by the economic hardships, the growing number of irregular troops, and the changes associated with the tax collecting system, iltizam. In this climate, various actors such as Levents, Sarıcas, Subaşıs, Kadis, or Mütesellims began extracting additional payments from the population. These extortions were either linked to an existing tax that was abused, or these taxes themselves were completely made up. Any Ottomanist would be able to count several of these made-up taxes. Bayrak Akçesi, Nal Akçesi, Tüfekçiyan Akçesi, Zahire Akçesi, Kaftan Baha, and so on. Diş kirası no doubt belongs here. It probably became widespread alongside these fictitious taxes within the same social context and under similar economic pressures. You can see an example of diş kirası in the order that was sent in response to complaints from Karaman. The second diş kirası practice was not known to everyone equally, and not everybody feared it. The elite in general didn't have to worry about it, and it is very likely that such an extortive practice couldn't have flourished in Istanbul under the watchful gaze of the Grand Vizier. So we have in our hand two completely different traditions that affect different segments of society with different connotations and cultural contexts that share the same name. Diş kirası of the elite and diş kirası of the Anatolian peasant did not match up. However, both traditions are now extinct, only one being remembered. An interesting question would be, why didn't they survive in the general culture? Just to give my answer quickly, I believe that the original dish kirası tradition that some people try to revive nowadays dropped from the cultural scene because of the collapse of the palace culture and the gift economy that it accompanied. The other extortive practice died because of the emergence of modern state and extensive control over the provinces with public servants that have regular salaries. This modern era did not leave much room for that kind of practice. In short, the context that gave rise to these phenomena completely changed and they died out with the culture they were born into. By looking at something as small as a tooth, this tiny tradition, I wanted to explore both the Ottoman culture and our collective memory. This short excursion in history, I think, shows that our collective memory doesn't treat all lived experiences with the same way. It recalls some and while it suppresses others. But here, I wanted to give you the whole story, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as I saw it and as much as I could. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your presentation and staying within the time limits. Our third and last presenter is Murat Aydın. He took his BA degree from Middle East Technical University, Department of History. Currently, he's a second-year MA graduate at, again, Middle East Technical University. And his primary interest is 17th century global crisis and its outcomes in Europe. And he's studying on those rebellions on a comparative basis with France and the Ottomans. And the title of his presentation is For a Fistful of Akçes, the transition from central army to paid soldiers in Ottoman Anatolia. Please.
First, I would like to thank you for this unique opportunity given to me. I would like to start with a quotation from Immanuel Wallerstein. For all these reasons, the modern world system is in structural crisis and has entered into a period of chaotic behavior, which will cause a systematic bifurcation and the transition to a new structure whose nature is yet undetermined. So, simply he said all these sentences for the modern age, but I always found that this sentence is also applicable for the early modern period. Because it was such a period, such a transitionary period from the feudal mode of production to a new one. So, the transition happened in many different fields. For example, in economic fields, we can say the first footprints of the modern banking system can be found in this age, thanks to the Medici family and the other Italian families around Europe. And also the credit organizations we can count, like the Figure family, and etc. But today, we will discuss something different than the fiscal transition, and we will discuss the military revolution and its impact on the Ottoman military tradition. So, at the beginning, I would like to discuss what was the military revolution, what was its core premises. In 1956, in Dublin, during a conference, Michael Roberts opened a new view for the historians, and he proposed a completely new term called the military revolution. He proposed 4 premises. The first one was the change in the tactics, the introduction of the linear system into the battlefield. The second one, the change in the strategy undertaken by Gustavus Adolphus during the 30 Years' War. The third one, and the most applicable one to the Ottoman case, is the increase in the army size, whereas a decrease in the number of soldiers, number of troops in a brigade. And the fourth one is a huge economic burden on the economy to sustain that huge armies. After that proposal, there was a huge debate in European historiography whether it happened only in Europe or the other states could follow up with the European experience. And I can say in the Ottoman Empire, the change happened more slowly, but they managed to follow this transformation. The empire responded to the military change in Europe in two ways. It increased the number of elite soldiers, the Janissaries, and created another group of elite soldiers called Sekbans. But the difference was like the Sekbans were taken among the Anatolian Levendat, we will discuss later. But to see the change, we have to examine the classical Ottoman military system, collection system, devşirme, the Timar system, and the what was the nature of these new brigades. So, the collection, it was simply a levy of human capital gathered from the non-Muslim families of Balkans. And the purpose here is to create a loyal military power, loyal military class for the personal service of the Sultan. And as we all know, it gives two career paths, either Enderun or Acemi Ocağı, to be a soldier in the Janissary class. The second main group of the Ottoman classical military system is the Timeriots. These forces were simply cavalry and they were granted some land in return of some obligations, which is the most important one is to join the army when the Sultan called the banners. And if the Timar was with lower income, they must join themselves, but for the medium and high income Timars, they must bring more cavalry or more soldiers alongside themselves. But of course, these middle or higher incomes is given to the higher ranking state officials in the Istanbul. And the third one, it's the response of the Ottoman Empire to the military change. Another group of elite soldiers among Anatolian Muslims named Sekbans. Sekbans consisted of different groups living in Anatolia and were mostly selected from among Levendat, landless male peasants of Anatolia. So those were the soldiers recruited during the wars and disbanded after the wars and campaigns. So they are simply a copy of condottieri in Italy, and they were like mercenaries. And Turkish historiography links their development as a group to changing social and land relations of Anatolia, but this is a huge discussion belonging to another presentation, so I will not dig deeper into it. The problem with the Sekbans was that after they were disbanded, the state had no control over their weapons or directly on those Sekbans. So when we think about the circumstances in Anatolia at the end of the 16th century, we can say that these uncontrolled and weaponized Sekbans joined either to the households of the powerful provincial governors for a payment for a living, or they directly joined the Celali bands, terrorizing the rural Anatolia. The Timar system was transforming, as I mentioned before, and with the dispatch of the Janissary forces to the peripheral areas as the agents of the center, this dispatchment created a competition for the posts in the center. And also it created the second wave of Celali rebellions initiated by the middle of the 17th century, which is called also the 17th century general crisis and in the Ottoman case. And those were the rebellions fired by governors, but also fueled by the problems Anatolia experienced during that age. The reason why the state needed these sec-bonds can be explained via the requirement of the new system of the battlefield. Maintaining a huge central army created a huge burden on the central treasury, and state needed more foot soldiers than cavalries because the nature of the war making has changed, and it was more like a siege battle rather than a battle on the plain area. So the requirement of the cavalries was on the fall, but the needings of those foot soldiers was on the rise. So empire adapted itself to the new circumstances. The numbers of the Janissaries, as I mentioned earlier, it was a response, again, given by the state to the military change in the European scene, was on the rise again. The number of Janissaries was about 8,000 in active mission and almost 4,000 in Acemi Ocağı in 1527. And within 40 years, this number reached to almost 13,000 on mission and 8,000 in the Acemi Ocağı. And if we look at the situation for a longer time span, by 1660, Barkan finds that the number of Janissaries exceeded 55,000, including the 22,000 sent on the posts in Anatolia or in Balkans. So the conclusion of the change for the Ottomans was the creation of new powerhouses in Anatolia as an opportunity given to the provincial landholders or governors to create their big households and create other centers of gravity to challenge or find a better post in the Ottoman center. Before the 16th century, the number of these sek-bonds was 2,000 or 3,000 in a special branch of the Janissaries. But in the first Celali period, started at the 1590s and continued until the end of 1610s. Any Celali leader, it can be either Can Buladoğlu, Kalenderoğlu, or Karayazıcı, was able to gather 20 to 30,000 sek-bonds for their own army. And I can conclude that a gradual rise in their number shows a change in the military tradition, a shift from the cavalry to an irregular foot soldier system. This was an easier way of enduring more during the battle while spending less. But it also has some setbacks, and the most important setback was creating a new center of gravity in Anatolia for those weapon bearers and contributed to the second Celali period on the Anatolian plateau. Thank you for your attention. My presentation is over.